Now that we've discussed the different types of visual aids, let's move to the guidelines for preparing visual aids. So first, it is important that we prepare visual aids in advance. And the reason why that's important is because it is critical that if you are going to use a visual aid, that you practice your speech and with your visual aid, that the first time that you are using your visual aid should not be when you are recording your speech for this assignment, nor if we were in a traditional class, the first time that you should be using your visual aid is when you're actually delivering your presentation. That there have been too many times where I have watched speeches where clearly the students just did not know when to present their visual aid, how to use their visual aid effectively in front of the classroom, and it just really created an unpolished performance. And so I highly recommend that, as always, that you should say your speech out loud several times before you deliver your speech as a finished assignment. And as you are practicing your speech, then you must use your visual aids during those practice sessions so that everything runs very smoothly, very easily, and it looks like you really put the time and effort into making this presentation happen. And it also ensures that your presentation ends within that safety zone that we've discussed for previous assignments. After you have practiced and prepared, then again, as the previous video that you've watched has stated, you want to keep your visual aid simple. That is really key. Don't try to get too complicated. Don't have too many moving parts in your speech because, again, for our informative assignment, you only have 5 minutes and 10 seconds. And so if there are a lot of moving parts within your speech, or if there are so many objects that it's hard to get through all of it in a timely fashion, then that's a critical mistake on your part. So if we're going to do images, make them nice and simple. If we're going to do charts and graphs, let's not try to show so much data, but just what's the most important things that we need to see. And so, yeah, very important. Also, that's why the previous video doesn't recommend that you use live animals in your presentations. Not that animals are bad, I love them, but again, you can never control completely what an animal might do, and that could impact how long your speech is, which then in turn means if you're getting full points on the timing portion of your presentation. So the simpler, the easier to see, the easier to explain, the better it's going to be, especially for the time limits that we have in our class when it comes to the presenting of your informative and of your persuasive speech. You want to make sure that your visual aids are large enough for the audience to see. If we're in a traditional classroom, you may have about 25 to 28 other individuals in the room. Everyone in the front row should be able to see your images without having to strain. Everyone in the back row should be able to see your images without needing to strain or move in order to see them. And so that's why it's important for your visual aids to be large enough. Now, for what we're doing this semester, you're going to be recording yourself. And so I, again, would recommend that your visual aids are not so large, but still large enough so that it can be easily seen on the camera. And therefore, I can understand, and other people who are watching your speeches can understand what you're doing. You want to use fonts that are easy to read. And so the best types of fonts are sans serif fonts. And all that means is that when you're typing, certain fonts have these little accent marks at the top and bottom of the lettering. That makes it look a little bit fancier. And the problem is that sometimes those little accent marks can also make it a little bit more challenging to read everything clearly. And so clarity is key in creating your visual aids. And so you just want to remove those little accent marks. And the easiest way to do that is just pick a font that is sans serif so that those accent marks aren't there to begin with. And so an example type of font you can use is Arial or Tahoma. So for example, this entire presentation is in Tahoma style. And so you don't see any of those little accent marks or ticks on the lettering, and it just makes it that much clearer to see. And then finally, you want to use color effectively. Color captures the audience interest. It kind of pulls us in a little bit more. And so if you're going to be doing a Google slide, if you're going to do PowerPoint, then you want to create a color profile that is engaging and captivating for your audience. If you are going to be doing charts and graphs, again, you don't want it to be so busy that it's hard to see and understand, but yet you want to still have that coloring component. I know printing out pictures that are full color can be a little bit pricey, but if you can, it would be nice to have a colored picture rather than a black and white picture. But again, if all you can afford is a black and white photograph, then I am fine with that. If you're bringing in objects, then you really don't need to worry about the coloring of those objects, right? Whatever those objects are should be totally sufficient. But you just want to think about, especially if you're putting together some kind of PowerPoint presentation, or if you're doing charts and graphs, that you just want to, A, does it have some color? B, is that color appropriate for the topic? So for example, let's say if I'm going to talk about the ocean, that's what my speech is, then my PowerPoint presentation should have like blues and greens to kind of highlight the ocean. I probably wouldn't have a red background, only because for me, a red background discussing the ocean, I start to think about the film Jaws and Jaws eating a lot of people. And so red may not be the best color choice in that situation. Now that we have covered how to put together our visual aids, let's finally move on and how do we present our visual aids. So the first thing that you want to think about is that you shouldn't use the whiteboard. Now, that's going to be very easy for us because we're not going to be in class when we're presenting our speeches. And so there probably is not a whiteboard at your home, and therefore you won't be needing to do that. The reason for this specific guideline is that when we use the whiteboard, our back is to the audience, and you just don't want to have your back to the audience. You always want to be facing front. So please think about that. The second guideline is that you want to display visual aids where listeners can see them. Sometimes speakers will put visual aids on the ground or in a very low position, and I can't see that visual aid. And so what am I supposed to be looking at? And so you just want to make sure that you're clearly displaying everything for everyone to see. You want to avoid passing your visual aids to the audience. And what that means is that sometimes people will bring in like a necklace or a ring or something small, and they'll ask for it to move throughout the classroom. Now, again, this isn't something that we have to worry about too much since we won't have a real live audience in front of us. But you just want to avoid that because it then means that, one, there's this extra layer of distraction as people are trying to talk to the person that they have to pass the visual aid to next. Also, that when you pass out the visual aids, then that's probably when you're talking about it, which is when everyone should see it, but only a select few are actually getting to see it. And then by the time it gets to the opposite side of the classroom, well, then those you're not talking about that object specifically anymore, and so there's a little bit of a disconnect. Now, if there's a visual aid where maybe you want to provide a handout to everyone at the same time, then I think that's a great choice to do, but it should be something where everyone is looking at, that you can direct their focus to certain aspects of the page all at once, not something that's being passed throughout the audience. Again, you should only display the visual aids when you are discussing them, that you don't want to have your visual aid up the whole time, that we're only talking about this object for a moment. Once you're done discussing the object, then put it to the side so that we as the audience aren't paying attention to it any longer. You really want to make sure the audience is paying attention to you fully, and if there's just an image that's in the background that's not truly discussing what you're discussing, then it can kind of create a little bit of a disconnect. You want to explain your visual aids clearly and concisely. And so sometimes people will just, hey, here's an image, but then they won't tell us what that image means. They won't discuss with us the significance of the image whatsoever. And so it's your job to ensure that when you provide us with an object, that we can truly understand what you're talking about. And then again, practice with your visual aids. That kind of goes back to what we've discussed before, which is just simply you want to prepare your visual aids early in advance so that you practice with your visual aids so that your presentations are all ready to go. That's it. That is our visual aid lecture. And so again, just remember, is it important? Is it something that the audience needs to see? Then definitely show that to us. Make sure that it is clear, that you're not just reading information from a page to us, but that you're really capturing our interest by having a captivating, invigorating kind of visual aid option. And just make sure that you practice. If you do those things, your speeches will be ready to go.